and welcome to United Church Online. We are so glad that you could join us today.
If you're new to United Church, we would love to get in touch. So why not click the link in the description and fill out one of our Connect cards, or go to our website for more information.
So let's get ready our notebooks, Bibles, and pens, and let's receive the word together.
Amen. Great. We continue our series on wisdom. And the challenge with doing a series on wisdom is the fact that nobody who preaches on wisdom identifies themselves as wise, or should identify themselves as wise. It always feels like you're underqualified for a topic like this, right? In fact, two things, wisdom and humility. Anybody who says they're humble usually isn't. And anybody who says they're wise usually isn't. Because the marker of wisdom is that you know that you are always in need of more. Just like the marker of humility is recognizing that I can't call myself humble, others call me humble, right? There's a verse in Exodus, is it in Exodus or Numbers somewhere, where it mentions now Moses was the most humble man of all. And people often think Moses wrote that about himself. And it's like, he knew not to say that. That was the scribe making a comment. And so the challenge is that, we become seekers of wisdom. And it's hard to see it in ourselves, but we begin to see it in our actions. We begin to see it in the way we live. And so it shows itself in what we do. And so last week we kicked off and we said there's a kind of wisdom that shapes our lives and results in consistent right living, right? That's the kind of wisdom we should seek. A kind of wisdom that informs our decisions, the kind of wisdom that forms the basis of our morality so that we know what is right, wrong, good or bad. And you might think that's a big deal until you look at society and you realize right and wrong, good and bad is up for the taking now, right? Our society has gone crazy with what God expects of us and what people think is right and wrong. There's a wisdom that forms the foundations of what we build our lives upon, and there's a wisdom that causes us to live differently. All of this is wisdom that God gives us, not what culture gives us. And so we can either choose to live on the basis of cultural wisdom, or we can live on the basis of God's wisdom. And so you and I need to make an informed decision. And so this morning we're going to jump over to James, and James has quite a bit to say on wisdom. And I think it's important that we listen to James, because James, the author James, was one of the brothers of Jesus. And so I reckon if you can convince your brother that you're the son of God, you've done a good job. Because all of us know siblings. You can't convince them of anything. And so by the time James comes to the conclusion that his brother is indeed the son of God, he's convinced, and you can see in the way he begins to teach. And so James is one of the leaders in the Jerusalem church. And so he has a few things to say to the church, and one of those is on wisdom. The foundation of this is how James looks at the challenges the church is facing. He looks at the things they're dealing with. In fact, he precedes this section in chapter 3 by speaking about the tongue, the words. The tongue is like a rudder, all of that. And then he goes on to speaking about wisdom. And here's what he says. If you are wise and you understand God's ways, you start a podcast and a YouTube channel and you buy yourself a podcast mic. No, James doesn't say that. I'm going to keep on doing that. If you've got a podcast, I love you, but he says, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with humility. Notice, wisdom and humility are very closely linked. The two can't be separated. When you grow in humility, you grow in wisdom, and vice versa. Doing good works with humility that comes from wisdom. And so James echoes the sentiments of Paul that wisdom isn't just knowledge. It's not just knowing stuff. It shows up in the way you live. Wisdom is applicable. Wisdom is practical. Wisdom shows up in our behavior, right? We know many people who are incredibly knowledgeable people. I'm sure you do too. They know a lot. They're very wise. They've got qualifications and all of that. Listen, they've got status. They've got accolades. They've got all the things, but their lives are marked by chaos and disorder. How is it that we can know so much, yet still not build anything of substance, still not be able to just conduct our lives orderly, or to build relationships or families, be a proper husband or father, mother or wife or whatever? It shows us that ultimately it's not just knowledge, it's wisdom that matters. And so James echoes not only Paul's writings, but we'll see now the writings of some of the Old Testament leaders that shows that wisdom always shows up in how you live. He goes on. He says, if you are bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying, for jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Interesting that he chooses those two vices. We'll unpack them in just a moment. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and, say it, demonic. Because apparently people don't believe in the demonic anymore. It's just bad vibes. No, it's demonic. James says what needs to be said, right? If these things begin to show up, jealousy, selfishness, and all of these, it starts with earthly thinking, unspiritual, and it leads to demonic. There's a progression. He says, wherever there's jealousy and selfish ambition, there will be disorder of every kind. And so James puts these two vices and he elevates them. And he says, if you want to know whether you are living wisely according to biblical standards or living wisely according to earthly standards, notice those two vices. When jealousy shows up, it's a problem. When selfish ambition shows up, it's a problem. It shows you that you are not working according to the wisdom from heaven, you are working according to the wisdom of the world. Why those two specifically? Why jealousy? For that, we need to go all the way back to the Old Testament. One of the men known as the wisest of authors, Solomon, sought after wisdom, wrote many of the prophets you and I read today in order to seek wisdom. And have a look what he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. He says, then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. Not because they've got a purpose that God has placed in them and they want to outwork their purpose. Not because they believe that as they grow they can be of greater influence. No, most people are motivated to success because envy is their driver. Jealousy is what drives them. Jealousy is what wakes them up in the morning. Jealousy is the thing that moves them forward. I mean, that's quite a vice. And here's the thing about jealousy and selfish ambition that makes it so difficult is it's undetectable. You can't often see jealousy in someone else. I mean, you see their pursuit for success and you're thinking, wow, can't believe you made it. What do? We post it on our Instagram. We're like, look what God did. But none of us would know that beneath the surface, they are pursuing something because they saw someone else have it and they feel entitled to it. They feel deserving of someone else's success. They feel jealous that they never got the promotion. And so this thing beneath the surface that is so subtle and undetectable really is what driving us if we are honest with ourselves. And James says, this kind of wisdom, jealousy, selfish ambition, that is earthly wisdom, it's unspiritual, and ultimately is demonic. And so you and I need to be very careful in what motivates us. He continues and he speaks about selfish ambition. And the challenge with selfish ambition again is it seems noble because you are the only one that knows the motive. However, it shows up in what we are willing to do to others to get what we want. I mean, we don't have to explain this. We've all seen it. We've seen in our workplaces and everywhere else what people are willing to do to one another to get to where they want to be. In fact, I was listening to radio a few years ago, and the whole segment of the show was essentially on what have you done to someone in your workplace to get you where you want to be. And people were calling in, listen, proudly. I deleted this lady's one email and she lost her job. And I'm like, people almost rough out here, youngs. Yesterday. But see, that's the reality. See, for the culture, that's celebrated. But again, James goes back, he says, that's demonic. That's unspiritual. That's not the kind of fruit we need to display. Again, when these things are prevalent, our behavior changes. And it shows the type of wisdom we're following. And so, James says there's an antidote to earthly wisdom. What is the antidote? Wisdom from above. He begins to list some criteria, some characteristics of wisdom from above. He goes on, he says, but the wisdom from above is first of all pure. It's not tainted by jealousy. It's not subtle. There are no hidden underlying agendas. The wisdom from above is first of all pure. It's also peace-loving. It's gentle at all times. It's willing to yield to others, which is so unlike selfish ambition. It doesn't want to yield to others, right? And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. So the wisdom from above comes with its own characteristics. You might not see them in yourself, but it shows up in your behavior. It shows up in how you treat others. It shows up in how you live. In fact, these characteristics become a marker for you and I to identify how we are growing. So maybe a good way to read this verse is ask yourself, am I, first of all, pure? Am I a pure kind of person? Do I live a pure life? Are my motives pure? Are my words pure? Right? Am I the kind of person who loves peace and is gentle, or am I always where the drama is? Wherever there's drama, I'm in the mix. I'm not going to mention it. In fact, I don't even feel like I should look at people right now because I don't want to make you feel a certain way. But, it's like, why whenever there's drama, you are there in the middle? Am I the kind of person who's merciful? Is that a trait, a characteristic that I embody? Am I the kind of person who does not show favoritism? Or do we kind of live? I mean, we all criticize nepotism on a corporate level, but we have our own little things that, our people. We know it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. That's like the proverb of our society. Wisdom from above. Am I always sincere? See, the wisdom from above develops these subtle characteristics in us. And again, we don't see it happen. It's not like you look back, you're like, man, I was so wise yesterday. We just live. We live our lives in such a way, and others begin to recognize it in us. And we begin to do things that embody these things. See, the wisdom from above, here's what it does. It forms us, it shapes us, and it molds us into being image bearers of Christ. Ultimately, the wisdom from above turns us into people that look like Jesus. So when we begin to look more like Jesus, we know that we are applying this wisdom. The further away we look like from Jesus, it shows that, hey, I'm not becoming like Jesus. That's when we know I'm actually working according to earthly wisdom. When I become jealous, when I become self-centered, when I become envious, when I start to do things for my own doing, for my own benefit, that's moving further away from the image of Jesus. Maybe that's why James chose those two vices. Of all of the ones that he could have chosen, maybe those two tell us something about our motive and why we do what we do. And so this morning, if we are going to be people who seek wisdom, and again, this is not coming from a place like I've accomplished it. This is simply pointing back into the scripture and saying this is how we can do it together. Firstly, it's recognizing that the wise crave wisdom from above. Why? Because we know that it's what develops our character. Wisdom from above is ultimately a character forming, a character development exercise. When you and I seek wisdom from above, all of these things that embody Jesus begin to become evident in us. And here's the challenge, right? Is that you and I understand that character development is closely linked to humility. And this is why James used the verse. I must just find it quickly. He says, if you are wise, understand God's ways, prove it by the way you live, doing good works with humility. So for James, humility is ultimately the thing we need if we're going to grow in our character, because there's no ways we're going to be shaped and formed and molded by God if we aren't humble enough to be taught by God. This is what sets heavenly wisdom apart from earthly wisdom, is that there's a desire for wisdom. In that, there's a desire to be shaped and molded. See, the challenge with cultural wisdom is people want to lead, but don't want to be led. They want to teach, but they don't want to be taught. They want to shape, but they don't want to be molded. Right? And this is something I try and teach our staff often, is whenever you find someone you really enjoy, a preacher, influencer, podcast, or whatever, ask yourself, who is this person's leader? Beware of a pastor that doesn't have a pastor. Can I say that? I'm allowed to say that, no? Why? Because if we are in a position where we aren't being shaped and molded or being taught or called out by anyone, we're in a very dangerous place. Humility. Everybody on every level needs humility. We need our lives to be open up to someone and say, hey, show me my blind spots. We'll speak about that in just a moment. And so you and I need to crave wisdom. By craving wisdom, we crave shaping, molding, leadership, correction. We embody humility. One of the biggest signs that we know we're on the right track, that we're moving in the direction that God calls us to, is by simply desiring wisdom from above. The more we ask ourselves, God, I need you to intervene. Show me the right way to go. Show me the right decisions to make. Show me the right things to say. Show me how I can better conduct this. Maybe look back in retrospect. God, how could I have handled this better? How could I have done that better? The pursuit of that is ultimately a sign that we desire wisdom from above. Proverbs forms the foundation of this. In fact, the book of Proverbs starts off by letting us know what the Proverbs accomplish in our lives. It says their purpose, or the purpose of the Proverbs, is to teach people wisdom and discipline and to help them understand insights of the wise. It goes on. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives and to help them do what is right, just, and fair. Aren't those beautiful characteristics to pursue? Wisdom, justice, fairness. To do what is righteous, justice, and fairness. To embody these principles. See, here's what we learn from the scriptures. These characteristics embody those who pursue them. When we pursue them, we develop them. And when we develop them, we embody them. And suddenly people begin to realize there's something different about you. Why? Not because I'm putting myself out there, self-advertising. It's simply because I embody the characteristics that mark wisdom. And so firstly, you and I need to be the kind of people that crave wisdom because it forms and shapes our character. Secondly, the wise live God-centered lives because they understand that God is ultimately their source of wisdom. And this is the unique paradox of being pursuers of wisdom. There's a painting, or an etching rather, by E.M. Escher, and it's an etching of two hands that are ultimately drawing each other. It's one of those little illusion type things. The one hand draws the one and the other hand draws the other, and you almost can't tell which hand is drawing which. Right? That's the paradox of this painting, of this artwork. In fact, this artist does a lot of this kind of work. And this is the perfect example of what it's like to pursue God and pursue wisdom. By pursuing God, you are pursuing wisdom. And by pursuing wisdom, you ultimately shift to pursuing God. The one leads to the other. The one hand is drawing the other. I'm pursuing God and I'm pursuing wisdom. I'm just going to do this from now on. And you're going to know what I'm talking about, See, the wise know that their pursuit of wisdom cannot be greater than or cannot be separated or at the expense of their pursuit of God. If I'm going to pursue wisdom, it starts with me pursuing God. This is what the Proverbs point to, the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 9:10, the fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. Job 28:28, it says, and this is what he says to all humanity, the fear of the Lord is true wisdom. It starts by fearing God. To forsake evil is real understanding. And so when we grow in our fear of the Lord, when we grow in our pursuit of God, ultimately we pursue wisdom. And as we pursue wisdom, we are ultimately pursuing God. The one leads to the other. There is a way to search for wisdom that is not of God, but it shows up. It shows up in our character, it shows up in our lives, it shows up in our families, it shows up in everything. But there's a wisdom that starts with the fear of God, and that too shows up. And it looks completely different. The Baker's Bible Dictionary phrases it this way, and I love this analogy. It says, the fear of the Lord is to wisdom what letters of the alphabet are to forming words. It's the foundation of everything. See, without the alphabet, you can't form words. Without doing one, you can't do the other. In fact, if you don't get the one right, it will hinder your ability to do the other. If we start with the foundations of fearing God, the fear of the Lord, pursuing God, desiring Him. Shani said it so beautifully in the offering message that ultimately our greatest pursuit is God. Everything else, the success that comes with wisdom, as beautiful as it is a byproduct of seeking God. Right? Everything else that flows from there is a byproduct of the one great pursuit, and that is of God. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but it's also the culmination of wisdom. As you grow in wisdom, you realize that's the one thing I want to do is pursue God, because He is the source of wisdom. And so let's get practical. 3 things that we can do this week, that we can put into our lives, that we can practice, that we can outwork, that will lead to wisdom. It's just the foundation and the starting point. We aren't there. We won't walk out here being super wise. But here's some things we can do. Firstly, let's ask God to show us our earthly wisdom triggers. Have you ever thought of doing that? God, show me where my earthly wisdom triggers are. Show me the things that I tend to do that I get from everyone else, from culture. Show me the things that I tend to do, the things I tend to lean on. My process for decision making that is just like the culture. In fact, that I got from the culture around me. How do I make my decisions? Show me my triggers where I'm tempted to go back and make decisions like everyone else. And here's a beautiful prayer to pray. Lord, show me the moments I drift into earthly wisdom and give me the grace to choose wisdom from above. Show me the moments I drift into earthly wisdom and give me the grace to choose wisdom from above. So when we do this, all we're doing is it's not going to change us immediately, but we are beginning to develop the awareness that there's a different kind of wisdom. See, if you haven't known or done this before, you've just been working in autopilot. Suddenly this makes us aware that, hang on, why am I deciding this? Is this just what society has taught me? Or have I actually sought God? Secondly, let's invite God into our decision making. Right? I know this sounds trivial, this sounds foundational, but let's be honest, we don't always do this. Right? How often do we run ahead in our decision making and right at the 99th minute, God, may you bless my plans. God is like, bless what? You've now decided what you want to do. I get this all the time. Pastor, won't you pray for us? Okay, what am I praying? We've already made the decision. We're doing this. We're selling our house. It's like, involve us in the process. Invite God into the process of your decision making, not at the end of your decision making. Right? Involve God in the process. Here's some good questions to ask. God, does this decision honor you? Why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I think it's best for me? Or somehow in this, is it honoring to you and your purpose for us? Right? Does this align with Scripture? My actions, my decision, my words, would this make me more like Jesus? Is this going to help with my formation, my shaping, my character development? I know these are basic and trivial, and you can expand the questions from there, but the point is to simply give God room to guide your decision making. Sometimes it might be a yes, sometimes it might be a no. Sometimes God might just do what he did for Abraham in the book of Genesis. This is a beautiful principle that I've learned many years ago, that oftentimes we think God will tell you left or right. When you go back to Genesis and you read the account of Abraham and Lot separating, look at what Abraham does. He says, Lot, where do you want to go? If you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I go left. I mean, in that moment, Abraham could have been like, Lord, show us which way to go. But Abraham understood something. Wherever I go, God is there with me. So whether I go left or right, God is going with me. Right? And this might set some of you free, because sometimes you're sitting there, you're thinking, God, fork in the road, left or right. And then you think, if I miss it, God's will for my life is over. You know, especially university, matric out into university, people freak out. Which university do I go to? Which one? It's like, listen, wherever you go, God is there with you. Right? It might take the pressure off sometimes. But what we want to do is we want to involve God in the decision. Because sometimes he will tell you left or right, and other times he'll say whichever. I'm going with you when you go there. Number 3, are we still okay? Let's invite wise voices into our world. This is so important, because this is another step that many people forget to do, is that we make decisions in isolation. We sit with the journey, we decide, it messes around in our heads, and eventually we just kind of come with the outcome. But if you and I approach a wise mentor, someone that's trusted, I kind of want to add to this that I didn't. Invite spiritual wise voices. And by that I mean someone who is spiritually mature, who maybe has gone before you, someone of, kind of substance. And all you're doing is you're not letting them make the decision for you. You're inviting them to maybe identify some blind spots that you haven't seen. So someone who has made decisions similar to yours and are able to point out, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about the implications? Because 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago when I made this decision, I didn't think about the outcomes in these areas. Someone who's able to expand your thinking a bit. Inviting wise voices, number 1, is beautiful because it shows you your blind spots. And let's be honest, if we're going to go according to the principle of humility, all of us have blind spots. All of us sometimes make a decision and we kind of have a bias. Have you ever noticed that we tend to sell ourselves on our own decisions? You become your own greatest salesman. If you do this, then you can do that. And then I'm gonna, right? And then you're like, yeah, man, this is why I need to do this. And by the time I have the conversation with my wife, I've sold myself on this. Like, listen, this is why we need that thing. It's like, no, you don't need it. Well, you've spent 3 days selling it to yourself. But if you have some wise voices who are able to identify and say, listen, why are you really doing this? I mean, you just got one of these recently, or you just made a decision like this. Why are you shifting it again? Is there something deep down that you're unsatisfied with? Hey, are you jealous of someone? Are you doing this because of what you get out of it? See, there needs to be people in your life who can ask you the tough questions and like culture, you don't end up cutting them off because they tell you what you don't want to hear. There need to be people who you invite into your world who can say the hard things and you walk away saying thank you. Have you ever had people who give you the good news in such a way, it's like a clap and a hug at the same time, and it happens so quick you don't know which one came first. Did I just get clapped or hugged? Either way, I'm comforted right now. I feel weird. You need those kind of people that are like, what are you doing? Come, let me help you. Seek wise voices who can call you out, give you wisdom, give you guidance, give you perspective. Then again, they're not going to make the decision for you. It's yours to make. But they give you perspective because you are the one that's going to live with the consequences of your decisions. If you and I do this, we simply open up our world to engage differently. God, firstly, I've sought your wisdom. I've identified my earthly wisdom triggers. I've invited you into the process. I've sought one or two wise voices who have gone before me and understand. And now, here's the decision I want to make. Would you bless me in this? That's a different way of decision making, isn't it? Let's be honest, if we're real, we don't always have the luxury of doing this. Because time is often the crunch factor. I need to make a decision quick. Right? There's a lot that hangs in the balance. I need to make it, these guys need an answer. I need to give feedback, blah, blah, blah. But here's the point. The more we do this, the quicker this process becomes. Why? Because we live in wisdom. When you aren't used to this, it takes a bit longer because you need to seek God, you need to fast, blah, blah, blah. But when we walk in this, we begin to walk in wisdom. Suddenly it goes from a month to 2 weeks to a week to being able to decide and go through this process within a day because we are people of wisdom. I walk in wisdom. I exercise this every single day in the big and the small decisions. I can consult God in the weight of a business decision, and I can consult God in the small things of leading a child in my home. I walk in wisdom daily. See, here's the thing. When we get this right, as I wrap up, when we get this right, we begin to embody wisdom like Jesus did. Wasn't Jesus the ultimate example of just knowing when to say, what to say, when to do, what to do? He just knew the right thing at the right time. Why? Because he embodied wisdom. And what we read last week in 1 Corinthians, Jesus is the wisdom of God personified. That's the goal, that we so slowly become like Jesus. We become people of wisdom who live wisely, not people who visit wisdom from time to time. Once a year, twice a year, we've got big decisions to make. God, let me consult. No, I consult God in the small decisions, which makes it easier to consult God in the big decisions. I begin to live in wisdom. Amen.
We trust this message was helpful to you.
And we'd love to stay in touch. So follow us on Instagram at United Church SA or contact us on our WhatsApp number. Be blessed.